Hello, everyone, and welcome back to post-graduation planning and preparation. Today's discussion is going to be on curriculum vitae and resumes. While there are a lot of similarities between the two, uh, there are also a lot of differences, and they are used in specific situations. So let's look at to see when they're really used. Okay, so let's define the difference between a curriculum vitae and a resume. So curriculum vitae is actually Latin for the course of one's life. What it basically is an account of one's career and qualifications. Now, it does span multiple pages, especially when we contrast that with the resume, which is usually 1 page to 2 pages long. Now, we are going to use this in academic settings, right? So the whole point of the curriculum vitae is to show your career, highlight your research and your other academic interests and skills. And so it's very academic in nature. It's designed for people who are planning on applying to graduate school or people who are interested in maybe entering the profession of research or becoming a college professor. On the other hand, you have probably what most of you are more familiar with, and that's the resume. So a resume is a shortened account of one's career and qualifications. So as I said before, it will span 1 to 2 pages. If you're going over 2 pages on your resume, you need to cut back significantly. In a undergraduate level, you will probably only have a 1-page resume. And that should be your goal, is to get it to 1 page. Now, if you just can't contain it on 1 page all, and you've done all kinds of research, you've done all kinds of really important things, then you can spill over to the 2nd page. But you have to ask yourself, is this is a chance that I'm taking? Is it a worthwhile chance? Now, resumes we use in non-academic settings, right? So this is anytime that you're applying for a job. Some professional schools want a resume as opposed to a curriculum vitae. This is kind of the default, right? If it's not an academic setting or for an academic purpose, you're going to use a resume. And what it does is it prioritizes and highlights relevant work experience and events, right? So whereas one is very academic in nature, the other is very focused on jobs and your profession. Now, that being said, as you are going throughout the course of your life, you're probably going to have both, right? It's smart to create a curriculum vitae and a resume. Academics do it. So we have curriculum vitae and they are very long. And so we all, for the most part, also have a resume, right? Which is just a very boiled down summary of our CV. So that being said, let's look at the structure because they do overlap, and we will talk about where they overlap, and then we will get to a point where they diverge, and then we can focus on those as they come up. So what you're going to do is you are going to begin with the basics. You would be surprised how many people forget this very basic information. You are going to start with your name. You're going to put your contact information on your resume or your CV. For your purposes, you should have both your home address and your school address and contact information, depending on the time of year, right? So if you are in the fall term and you are applying for a job in the fall term as an internship or something like that, then just the place where they can reach you at the school, that's probably sufficient. But if you're looking at something spanning the summer or part of a school year and part of the summer, then you're really going to want to pull in both home information and school information. You're also going to want to make a note of the transition period, right? So you could say May through August, and then have your home address, September through April, and have your school address and contact information. Now, this is also the point where you begin to design your professional style or template that you intend on using. Now, this is not a time to demonstrate your personality, right? So you will see resumes if you do a Google search that have like pictures and color, and that might be acceptable if you are going into like a communications position where you'll have to produce those types of things. But if you're not going into a communication position, and you're not going into advertising or something where you want to demonstrate from the get-go that you are this, creative person, the best default is to demonstrate that you are a professional, right? And unfortunately, professionals, we tend to be very black and white. Now, it doesn't mean there can't be a pop of color here or there, but you don't want to go overboard, right? So you see there's two examples that we have below. One is from my CV, and one is from a former student. And you can see the different styles that we've taken, but the same information is conveyed. Now, in my style, you'll see that it gives you more room, right? You've got a little bit more room to deal with. It doesn't take up as much space. Whereas in Sean's example, it has quite a bit more space that gets taken up by the contact information. One thing I also want to caution you is please, please, please avoid Microsoft templates. So what do I mean when I say stay away from Microsoft templates? Here's a prime example, right? So this is one that it looks like suggests is a doctor. And it looks nice, right? It might help you stand out, but it's not what we would consider generally professional. For instance, it gives you some pretty bad information. So under like education, and we'll talk about education in a minute, it tells you it's okay to brag about your GPA, awards, and honors. Feel free to summarize your coursework too. That's not entirely true. As a hobby section has this weird skills percentage section, stay away from it. That being said, Microsoft Word does make it easy because there is Resume Assistant. So what you can do is you can see examples of how people have described their work experience on LinkedIn. You can even kind of pull in LinkedIn information into the document. So, I mean, there is a room for it. There is some good behind it. But again, I would recommend staying away from it. Let's take a look at another one. This one's actually considerably better. Right, so if you really need to splash a color, if you're just like, I have to have color, which I recommend you don't, but if you have to have color, this is it, right? This is a basic resume. If your first name, I don't know why the last name is in all caps, or excuse me, is bold. I wouldn't. I would keep it the same as the first name and the same color. And you can put a section that you're talking about what your goal is, your purpose, but we know, right? I mean, if you're applying to graduate school, graduate school is going to know that you are applying to graduate school to go to graduate school. Same thing for a job. They know that you're going to be applying for the job to get that job. So this one is a little bit better. It's not in the order that we're going to talk about. Again, this is usually for people who have experience on the workforce and aren't necessarily constraining themselves to your requirements as an undergraduate student. Now, these are okay for inspiration. So if you need to look for a template to help you out, which again, please don't. But if you do, you can go to new, type in the word resume, and it's going to give you all all these types of resumes. I mean, just a ridiculous number of resumes. And again, it's going to help you when it comes to trying to figure out what design you would like to use, how you would like to present your information, how your cover letter, how your references should be kept. It does it does have some okay examples, right? So if you want to go with like bare basics, you can go with this one. This is a teacher resume. Then you should go to create. And what this will do is this will pull up a new document, right? And here is very basic. This is one that is overused a lot. I suggest again you stay away from this. It's not that, it doesn't look that great, but it's also, again, if you're looking at Microsoft templates, they're going to be either wrong or they're going to be overused. And your goal is to be a professional, but still stand out in your professionalism. And so to that end, we'll take a look a little bit later at some CVs and some resumes that definitely have hit that mark. So we're back here at looking at the resumes and looking at what all goes into a resume, right? So, or CV. So this will be the same regardless of whether it's a CV or whether it's a resume. But you can see we start out with black and white. Again, you're a professional. You need to convey that you're a professional. So again, black and white is usually your best bet. The next section, this will differ depending on how far along you are in your career. But generally speaking, your education as an undergraduate student, your education section will come first. Now, later on in your career, your education section might get bumped down to like the second or third section. If you're doing a CV, then your education section should absolutely come first. And that really doesn't change. So in your education section, you are going to identify your school, so the colleges that you've attended. At this point, drop high school like it's hot. High school should not appear on your resume or your CV, period. Right? Unless you develop the cure for cancer in high school, leave everything high school related off of your resume. Right? Leave everything high school related off of your CV. So you're going to list your school, you're going to list your major or majors, any specializations that you focused on or that you had. You're going to list your year of graduation or your anticipated year of graduation. You're going to list any Latin honors. And what we mean by Latin honors is summa cum laude, magna cum laude, and cum laude. And if you do not have an awards and honors section in your resume, so if you decide that like there's just not enough space, or like listing one might seem like a waste of heading, then a short list is appropriate here. So the example I have is actually from my CV. It's actually two parts of my CV put together, but this would be what your education section would look like. Again, it's black and white. It kind of seems boring, but you look down it, you see the pertinent information. Suffolk University Law School, Boston, Massachusetts. It was a Juris Doctorate with a trial appellate advocacy concentration. I graduated magna cum laude. Here's my GPA, noting that I was in the top 5% in my class. That's one thing I want to point out is you can list your GPA if your GPA is good. Right? If it's something that you are proud of, put it on there. But if it is below a 3.0, if it's below really a 3.5 at the undergraduate level, don't put it on. Right? And when you get to graduate school or law school, like a 3.797 is really, really, really good. just because of the difficulty of the schools and how all that works. So kind of a good baseline is, are you above a 3.5 or below a 3.5? If you're above a 3.5, tell us. If you're in the top 10% or the top 5% of your class, tell us. You also know I did have some activities that I did below it that are related. They are more honors than anything else, but I was on Suffolk University Law Review. I was the note editor of the Law Review. I was on the National Health Law Moot Court team, and I was a teaching assistant for Professor Janice C. Griffith, teaching property law. Right, and you can see I got my degree in May 2015. So after your education, you will have a section generally entitled Relevant Experience. Now, I hate seeing relevant experience, the phrase, on a resume. I think it's better to say professional experience if it's a professional setting, right? Or somehow relate it back to what you want to do. So for example, you'll see in the picture below, for my resume is selected legal experience, right? So you can even have a section called selected experience. And what it does is it implies I have a lot more, but these are just the really important things that I want you to notice. So what you're going to do in your experience section, right, and this will come second, is you are going to list your various employment, if it's relevant to what you want to do, in a reverse chronological order. So what you're normally going to do is you're going to list your employer, the location, your position, the dates of employment, and then 3 to 4 bullet points outlining the experience. So let's put a pin in that for a second. And let me say, and it really is upon you, and I'll mention this later, to make an experience relevant. Right? So let's say that you are going to law school and during college you worked at McDonald's. Is a law school or a graduate school going to care, or even a professional employer going to care that you worked at McDonald's? The answer is it depends on you. So you have to frame your bullet points outlining your experience in such a way that it makes it relevant to the position or to the occupation or to your ultimate end goal that you are trying to achieve, right? So instead of saying, I flip burgers, I multitasked in a very high-paced, high-pressure situation, ensuring satisfaction and ensuring accuracy. Well, that sounds a lot better than I flipped burgers, right? It means the same thing, but one is relevant, one makes me excited, one makes me say this person is a go-getter, and the other is this person just flipped burgers, I don't care why they're telling me this, right? So it's upon you to make it relevant. So here's selected legal experience. I have academic experience, I have professional experience, this is my legal experience. You see I have the name of the employer, I'll have the title that I had below, you'll see the dates that I worked with them, and then you'll see bullet points below it, right? So for being a dispute mediator and arbitrator, I list my license number, and I also list any advanced trainings that I have. In addition, you look under the United States Court of Appeals for the First Circuit, you'll see a summary of what I did. And again, this will be applicable to practice. This will be applicable to anyone who needs somebody who's experienced in the legal setting. All right, so I independently researched and drafted bench memorandum for oral arguments and subsequent opinions, reviewed, evaluated, and made recommendations regarding notices of appeal, briefs, and collateral petitions, and assisted senior law clerks in researching opinions and orders for publication. You see, in those 3 bullet points, I've just summarized exactly what I did, and hopefully I've done it in such a way that it's relevant to the employer or to the end goal that I am trying to achieve. So that being said, there are some strict rules when it comes to formatting your 3 to 4 bullet points. Okay? So bullet points outlining your experience virtually always begin with an action verb. And they do not have to be complete sentences. So your action verb is going to be really important, as well as the ending of the action verb. So any past employment or past experiences, you're going to end in an ed verb, right? So the very first word that I see in your bullet point will be an ed verb, meaning I did this previously. If you're presently doing these actions or this activity or this employment, you will you'll begin with an ing verb, right? So take a look down at the picture at the bottom of your screen. This is something I did at a private equity firm. This is something I did, right? So this is past tense. Look at the first word of each bullet point. I evaluated, I negotiated, and I mediated, right? So this tells me it's past tense, so I'm no longer doing it. But it's also very strong verbs, right? It's not, it doesn't begin with I did this, no. Evaluating potential risk exposures for live private equity funds, making appropriate recommendations, negotiated indemnity agreements between and among corporate entities and between competing brokers, mediating claims in the event of dispute, potential covered losses after initial indemnification was denied. Right? Like this is like legalese for the legalese. But again, pay attention to the first words, right? Evaluated, negotiated, mediated. Now, if I was still working for this employer, I would say evaluating, negotiating, mediating, and then have a summary of what I did. And your summary has to be accurate. It has to be exactly what you've done. There is no room for puffery in a resume or a CV because they do get checked. And if you have puffed, if you have fluffed, you're usually gonna be able to spot it, 1, and 2, you don't want to be called out on something that you didn't actually do. So as I said before, it's up to you to make the experience relevant to the position, right? So for instance, let's say as a college professor, this is on my resume and it, or my CV, and it is, right? What does evaluating potential risk exposure for large private equity funds, making appropriate recommendations and negotiating and mediating, what does it have to do with teaching criminal justice and law? Well, what it shows is I have experience not only handling very big projects and doing very big things, but I also have legal experience that is directly related to what I hope to end up teaching to my students here at the college. Now, if you are in search of an action verb, and you're like, I don't know how to begin this phrase. I kind of know what I want to say, but I don't know how I want to say it. There's a really great link right here to action verbs. So when you click the link, it'll take you to action verbs. It's a great list. Another way that you can access the list is you can Google just action verbs for resumes, and you will get long lists that just have action verbs, right? And you choose the one that seems the most appropriate, the most eye-catching, and not to sound crass, but kind of the sexiest action verb, right? Like something that's going to make somebody go, damn, all right, I like this, right? That's what you're shooting for, is you want somebody to stop, look at your resume, and hesitate for a second. Because the most boring, the worst thing you can do is just have a resume that's either just disjointed, is not relevant, doesn't use proper terminology. whatever. It's generally speaking, admissions officers spend maybe 3 to 5 seconds looking over a resume and in their decision to either presumptively admit, presumptively deny, or send to the committee for for a vote. To this end, you want them to look down it and be able to see exactly what you've done, but you also want them to stop and go, wow, you did this. Holy cow. And you know, even if you don't think you have done great things, you have. You're in college, you've multitasked, you understand basics of business, you understand basics of whatever profession you're in. So you can use internships under professional experience, right? So internships are perfectly fine to use. Jobs, any jobs are perfectly fine to use. But again, it's up to you to make the experience relevant for the position you're seeking or the graduate program you're seeking entry into. Now, this is finishing the resume, right? So this is where the resume is going to end. So remember that at the undergraduate level, your resume will generally be only about 1 page. But there's a strict rule in place where you fill the page. There should not be white space. What does white space indicate? White space indicates a couple things. Either one, you were too lazy to really dive in deep and write a good resume, or two, you just don't have the experience or qualifications, right? You could not come up with anything. In your past 4 years of college, you could not come up with enough things that you've done to round out your resume, right? White space tells me this person does not care. This person is not qualified. So fill the page. Now, if you're looking for other things to fill the page, you can do community service, professional organizations, really anything. The one thing I strongly caution you against, and so many resumes do this and it drives me up a wall, is they have a hobbies and interests section. I'm going to put this to you bluntly. Nobody cares about your hobbies or your interests unless it's your research interests or it's somehow relevant to what you want to do. Beyond that, like, I don't care. I don't care if you like to watch Law and Order. Like, I don't care. I don't care if you like to play Frisbee golf. That has absolutely nothing to do with what you're trying to accomplish, right? We get that you're going to be a well-rounded human being, that you have other hobbies and activities. But if I'm an employer, I want to see that you're going to focus on me. If I'm a graduate school, I'm going to want to make sure that you are focused on me, right? That you will put your life on hold, your hobbies, your interests, they will come second to my needs. So because of that, do not include a hobbies and interests section. It's just a very, very bad idea. Now, this is where resumes typically end, right? You have, at the undergraduate level, you begin with your contact information, then you move to your education, then you move to your professional or relevant experience, and then you move to anything else that you need to fill the page. So here's an example of how I round out my CV. I have legal affiliations and memberships, right? So I belong to the American Bar Association, American Bar Association Criminal Law section, Phi Alpha Delta, Phi Delta Phi, Society of Legal Scholars. These are all recognized legal, academic, and professional institutions and organizations. If you find yourself having to explain what something is, then maybe think about it twice, right? So anybody in the legal field, for instance, the section I have here, anyone in the legal field is going to recognize Phi Delta Phi. They're going to recognize Phi Alpha Delta. They're both honor societies. Phi Delta Phi is the highest legal honor society there is. They're going to recognize it right off the bat. right? But if I put this same resume, if I'm looking for a job, let's say in the medical field, and I put that I was in Phi Delta Phi, they're going to have absolutely no clue what the hell I'm talking about, right? So again, even when you're talking about cultivating maybe a community service section or a professional organization section, if you need to, you can put a brief explanation as to what it is. Or if you think it's too distracting, it's okay to leave out. Right? You don't have to tell us everything. That's what the interview is for. This is really to get you an interview, right? That's all this piece of paper is. This piece of paper is, hi, I'm Dan. This is a little bit about me. If you're interested, I'd love to talk more. That's all it is. And then during the interview, then you can talk about other things, right? You can talk about, oh yes, I'm also a member of Phi Delta Phi. It's actually the highest legal honor society there is, and the oldest in the United States. Okay, that you didn't need to put that on your resume, but that was great for an interview. Even in your interview, somebody might ask you, so what do you do in your free time? I always hate that question because you feel like you have to relate it back somehow to your employer. We'll talk about interviews later, but it's great if you can relate it back to your field, but it's not necessarily completely required, right? So again, as you're going through this document, as you're going through your resume, you need to ask yourself repeatedly, am I following the rules? Am I making every single thing on my resume not only relevant, but inviting a future conversation? Right? Because you want that hiring manager to get so excited by your resume that they cannot wait to talk to you. Or they're like, this guy seems really, really qualified, but has a diverse background. Or this young woman, she's just graduated or she's about to graduate college, and it looks like she has a lot of potential. I definitely want to speak to her. Right? That's what you're trying to get. You're trying to get some kind of reaction from the hiring manager, or if some schools make you use a resume instead of a CV, you're trying to get some kind of action from a committee. You're trying to get somebody to invite you to have a conversation. Now, that being said, you won't always be invited to have a conversation. And in these cases, your resume should be that conversation, right? Your resume should be, here are the important points you need to know about me. This is why it's relevant, and this is why I am the best person for the job, right? That is what you are trying to convey. So never, never, never forget your end goal. Every piece of every job description, everything should be custom tailored for each job that you are applying to. Now, that's one thing that a lot of people make a mistake about is they have one resume and one CV, and they get it proofread and they feel like it's perfect, but they don't relate it back to the employer, right? You want to show the employer, you're going to want to look at the job description, and then in the job description, take that and apply it in your resume. Take words right out of the job description. There are actually algorithms now that sort through resumes because you have so many people applying for jobs. There are when you submit like online, like through Indeed.com or something like that, your resume gets sent through a computer database, and it looks for key terms. It looks for key terms that are in the job description, and the more key terms that you use from the job description, the higher it's going to recommend, and more likely it's going to recommend that the hiring manager read this resume and place you towards the top of the candidate pool. The fewer words that you use from the job description, the less likely it is you're going to get a phone call, the less likely it is a hiring manager or an admissions officer is going to look at it, see about it, or care about it. Right? So again, this should be always changing. You should always be updating it. You should visit your resume, I say every 3 months, if not sooner. I visit mine about once a month. And if you're looking for a job or you're looking for a certain position, take the job description and see how you can incorporate the words that are used in the job description into your resume. So we just talked about finishing the resume. Let's talk about finishing out the CV, right? So again, here's where this is where we break, right? Because the first sections are all the same. Education, relevant experience or professional experience, or however you want to word it. Then we break off, we separate, right? At this point, CVs, which you are going to use in an academic context, it's what you are going to use when you are applying to graduate school, when you're applying to law school. You're going to use the CV, not a resume. Now, that generally speaking, this only entitles you to roughly 2 pages. And again, fill the page. You at the undergraduate level should probably not surpass 2 pages unless you have just done a ridiculous amount of research and scholarship or academic awards, or you've engaged in conferences with professors, whatever it is. If there's a reason to include a 3rd page, make sure you fill it, but make sure it's not something that you could address in another way, right? Because our attention spans only last so long. Like my CV that I have an example is on your Canvas page that you can look at. Like, in my opinion, it's too long. That being said, there's no real other way that I can think of right now that I can shorten it. And I keep thinking of different ways and things along those lines. So again, you want to convey, even in the CV, the most succinct and relevant information in the, again, it's crass, but the sexiest way possible, right? You want somebody to look at that resume and go, hot damn. So your focus at this point, so after professional experience, your focus is going to change back to academics, right? So you have education, contact information, education, relevant experience. Then we're going to do a hard left into academics. So you're going to maybe have a section entitled Scholarship and Research. This point, it's really crucial to highlight the research that you are interested in, that are similar to the programs you are interested in, right? So if you are interested in a certain subject, certain subsect of psychology, it's really important that you highlight research that you've done that relates back to that certain field in psychology. For law school, it's really important that you highlight research that you've done or significant papers that you've done that relate to the law or your future career, right? So if you're interested in going into a law program, and we talked about searching for ones that have clinics that are tailored towards you, if that's your route, then you want to highlight things that you've done that show you have the scholarship and research capabilities to engage in that kind of academic, high-level ordered thinking. Now, that being said, it does not necessarily at the undergraduate level have to be published research. So you can include class papers of a significant length, right? So I don't want a 5-page paper. This is, you are telling me about a 20 or 25-page paper that you wrote, right? Something very significant, something very crucial. We also would like to see in this section, you may include conference presentations and speaking engagements. So this can include significant class presentations, right? So for instance, you did a 20-page paper and then you did a half an hour presentation over your paper that was open for questions or whatever. You can include that, right? It doesn't have to be, because you're at the undergraduate level. We don't expect you to be the professional yet. We don't expect you to be the wholesome academic yet. Right? This is, look, I have, and this is really what we're talking about here, I have the potential for greatness. These are my interests. This isn't something I'm just doing just because. This is something that I want, that I've worked for, that I deserve. You can also include, if you have space, an academic awards section. Again, certain awards you can leave off, like people don't care. But if you get like valedictorian, I mean, you're probably going to want to include that in your education. But if you get outstanding student in criminal justice, or the provost prize for legal studies, or the provost prize for psychology, you're going to want to include that, right? Like that's going to be pretty important information. And then again, here's where you can pull in professional affiliations and memberships. So if you are interested in going into psychology, I would suggest that you join the American Psychological Association, the APA. They do have student memberships, which are a lot cheaper than professional memberships. Same thing is true for law. If you're interested in law, join the American Bar Association. They have all kinds of subset organizations and subset committees and subset, like if you're interested in tax law, there's a whole program of tax law for you that you can join. If you're interested in criminal law, there's a whole section on criminal law that you can join. Civil rights law, a whole section on that you can join. So again, think about what you want to do. What is the premier professional affiliation in that field, right? If you're thinking med school, think about the American Medical Association. Get a student membership. Now, they're not cheap. They will cost you probably $100 to $200, somewhere in that range. Some going to be a little bit lower, some going to be a little bit higher. So I encourage you to join one. But also I encourage you to take a look at other professional associations and memberships, right? So if you're interested in psychology, if you're a member of Psi-Chi, put that under the affiliations. If you are a member of Phi Delta Phi and you're interested in law school, put that in your affiliations, right, in your memberships. In this, you'll include dates, and these should be readily recognizable to anybody in that field, right? So if you're applying to medical school, everybody's going to know what the AMA stands for, right? Now, if there's any other professional organizations that relate to being pre-med or that relate to medicine in general, go ahead and include those in your professional affiliations and membership section. And that will round out the CV. So the last thing I want you to take note of is you may be sitting here thinking, I don't have enough, or I'm not enough, or I'm not good enough. Well, you know what you need to do? You need to tell your mind to shut the hell up, because you are good enough. And if you don't think you have an impressive enough resume, you still have time to build an impressive resume. You still have time to build an impressive curriculum vitae, but you have to start now. Don't wait till you're applying to start joining organizations. Do it now. Get leadership roles now. Talk about those leadership roles. Show prospective employers, show prospective schools that you are deserving, that you are freaking awesome, and that they should talk to you. And the way you do that is with your resume or your CV. So that being said, thank you for listening. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. Again, my CV is available on, as well as Dr. Zong's CV is available on Canvas, as well as a simple Google search of us. You will be able to find our CVs. You'll also be able to find student CVs and student resumes to see what those look like. So again, if you have any questions, let me know, and I'll be happy to answer them for you.